Tonight, we begin with a development that Social Security officials, financial advisors, and retirement experts had anticipated, warned about, and quietly prepared for. A policy shift that unfolded not over years of debate, but in a single legislative session. A single legislative session that will reduce retirement income for millions. A single legislative session that caught many Americans completely off guard. A single legislative session that fundamentally changes the retirement landscape. What Congress did in late 2024 crossed a line that retirement advocates had hoped would hold, and when that line broke, the Social Security Administration did not hesitate. They responded with precision, transparency, and urgency, alerting beneficiaries that March 2026 would bring an unwelcome surprise. For 18 months now, there had been murmurs, not official announcements, not press releases, just murmurs, that lawmakers were preparing something historically significant. Congress has been concerned about Social Security solvency, yes, but they have been divided in their concern about Social Security solvency. Their moves have followed a certain pattern, a rhythm, almost a predictability. But what set off alarm bells in Washington and retirement communities this fall was that the rhythm went silent. Financial analysts who monitor congressional activity on entitlement programs know the indicators. The committee hearings that suddenly go private, the bipartisan closed-door meetings, the actuarial reports released on Friday afternoons, the sudden absence of political grandstanding, all of that went quiet. And whenever Congress goes quiet on Social Security, it means something is about to get loud. Early November 2024, Social Security Administration officials detected what they described as a fundamental recalculation in the cost of living adjustment formula, including provisions that had not been altered in over 4 decades. These are the kinds of legislative changes that Congress only implements when they are signaling something very specific. A solvency crisis is imminent. Political cover exists for unpopular measures, or both parties have agreed to share the political cost. Budget analysts didn't know which category this fell into, or whether it fell into all 3 at once. But what they did know was that the government was changing its approach to retirement benefits. And when federal agencies shift their approach to retirement benefits without explanation, even by seemingly minor technical adjustments, retirees and financial planners pay attention. The notification issued by the Social Security Administration in January 2026 was not normal. It was not routine. It was not symbolic. It was urgent. Officials after internal review meetings described the March 2026 adjustment as unprecedented in modern Social Security history, affecting approximately 23% of current beneficiaries, and perhaps most importantly, targeted at those who retired under specific calculation windows that lawmakers deemed overly generous. But warnings only work if the target hesitates. Affected retirees did not. In fact, their response today was among the most vocal we've seen in retirement policy debates. Here's what we know. Within 72 hours of the official announcement, advocacy groups mobilized nationwide campaigns. These weren't the typical petition drives. These were coordinated legal challenges, congressional lobbying efforts, and media campaigns, strategies that retirees' organizations only deploy when they are preparing to fight legislation all the way to the Supreme Court if necessary. Tonight, Social Security Administration sources confirmed that the recalculation affects retirees in 3 specific categories, including early retirees who claimed benefits between 62 and their full retirement age that had recently been classified as having received disproportionate lifetime benefits for what analysts believe was political expediency disguised as actuarial fairness. The government acted before public opposition could build sufficient momentum. They targeted early retirees. They targeted those with spousal benefits calculated under older formulas. They targeted certain government workers that were likely receiving both pension and Social Security benefits under legacy rules. In other words, lawmakers targeted the most mathematically defensible groups to reduce benefits without touching current workers' future promises, the legal framework that would have made it contestable. This is what made retirement advocates' warning so urgent. Congress's calculation changes weren't just symbolic, they were actionable. They represented the kind of move that could reduce monthly benefits by $150 to $340 for affected retirees if left unchecked. And advocacy organizations, understanding that fully, responded with force. Not recklessly, not impulsively, but strategically. They didn't protest randomly. They didn't file frivolous lawsuits. They hit congressional offices in swing districts. They hit media outlets with personal stories of affected seniors. And here's where the story becomes even more troubling. Policy analysts now believe that Congress's latest move was designed to test public tolerance for benefit reductions after years of warnings about Social Security's trust fund depletion. Lawmakers wanted to see whether the public would accept targeted cuts to specific groups rather than across-the-board reductions. But instead, the opposite happened. The public and advocacy groups didn't quietly accept the changes. They launched a resistance campaign that was so coordinated, so effective, that even congressional leadership noticed. You don't get Washington's attention easily during an election year, but today, retirees did. Budget experts speaking with major media under anonymity described the March 2026 reduction as a trial balloon, a way to gauge whether broader Social Security reforms could pass without major political backlash. But affected beneficiaries proved today that they remain both politically engaged and organizationally powerful. Their response was not only swift, it was so precisely targeted at vulnerable legislators that committee chairs began receiving calls from party leadership within days. That political pressure matters because it shows retirees remain a voting bloc that cannot be dismissed. It shows that the retirement community is not passively accepting benefit cuts. They are actively fighting every reduction. As reports continued coming in throughout the week, we learned more about the scale of the benefit reduction. Approximately 14 million retirees will see reductions ranging from $87 to $340 monthly, forcing significant budget adjustments. Spousal benefit recipients under legacy calculation rules that had been grandfathered in during the 1980s reforms will lose an average of $156 per month. Former government employees operating under the windfall elimination provision reportedly will see additional reductions used by Congress to close what they characterize as loopholes. This wasn't just a technical adjustment. This wasn't just a routine recalculation. This was a fundamental policy shift. This was a redefinition of retirement security for millions. And retirement security is the one thing middle-class Americans have struggled to maintain since the 2008 financial crisis. For every modest cost of living increase they have received, Congress has countered with something that claws back benefits through taxation, Medicare premium increases, or calculation changes. Remember, policymakers thought Social Security reforms could be implemented quietly during divided government. They thought targeting specific groups would diffuse opposition. They thought retirees would prioritize other political issues over modest benefit reductions. But tonight, the exact opposite is happening. Retirees have made this their primary political focus. Opposition has unified rather than fractured. What seemed like a modest reduction has become a major political liability. What makes this moment so consequential and so volatile is that Congress's latest move happened at a time when lawmakers are under intense pressure from multiple constituencies. Deficit hawks want immediate entitlement reform. Progressive Democrats want expanded Social Security funded by higher payroll taxes on wealthy Americans. Conservative Republicans want means testing and gradual privatization. Moderate swing district representatives want any solution that doesn't cost them re-election. Congress is balancing these demands while facing a 2026 trust fund depletion deadline that economists say could trigger automatic across-the-board cuts of 23%. And when leaders in that position make sudden moves, they're not doing it from strength. They're doing it from pressure. They're doing it from vulnerability. The Social Security Administration's official guidance document, now posted on SSA.gov and mailed to affected beneficiaries, was designed to signal that the agency is not willing to implement reductions without clear communication and appeal processes. SSA officials said plainly that the March 2026 recalculation was required under the 2024 Social Security Sustainability Act. That is bureaucratic language for, Congress made us do this, and we're just following the law. You don't usually hear that tone from federal agencies unless something serious is at stake. Meanwhile, AARP's CEO addressed members in a passionate, urgent speech last week. She said, "This is not a minor technical adjustment. This is a broken promise to Americans who planned their retirements based on the rules they were given." She said, "We will fight this in Congress, in the courts, and at the ballot box." And she said, "Every member of Congress who supported this will answer to 38 million AARP members." These are not rhetorical flourishes. These are statements from an organization that understands just how high the stakes have become. Here's what makes the situation even more concerning. Congress's latest move wasn't isolated. Along with the benefit recalculation, the IRS also increased the taxation threshold on Social Security benefits. Medicare raised Part B premiums by 6.8%, which are automatically deducted from Social Security checks. Several states increased taxes on retirement income targeting middle-income retirees. All of this happened within the same 6-month period. When government at multiple levels moves against retirement security simultaneously, it means something larger is underway. Financial planners are now considering several possibilities. One is that government at all levels is preparing for a prolonged period of fiscal tightening that will disproportionately affect retirees. Another is that lawmakers are attempting to gradually reduce the political power of entitlement programs by making cuts incrementally rather than all at once. A third possibility, the one worrying retirees the most, is that this is just the beginning of benefit reductions that will eventually affect all current and future beneficiaries. But today, advocacy groups took that card off the table. They didn't accept the changes quietly. They didn't fragment into competing interest groups. They didn't let the issue fade from public attention. They unified and mobilized. What we're watching now is a test of political will. Congress wants to see whether they can reduce benefits without facing electoral consequences. Retirees want to show they remain a decisive voting bloc that cannot be ignored. The Social Security Administration wants to prevent a complete trust fund collapse that would be far worse than targeted reductions. And future retirees want to prevent the complete erosion of a program they've paid into their entire working lives. Tonight, we've heard from congressional staffers who are now privately expressing concern about constituent backlash. They say phone calls are running 50-1 against the benefit reductions. They say town halls have become confrontational. And they say Congress's decision to implement these changes during an election year is likely part of a miscalculation intended to bury the issue among other political controversies. But retirees are not letting this be buried. In fact, retirees are making this the defining issue of the 2026 midterm elections. Their response today, organized, sustained, and politically strategic, sent a message to lawmakers that retirement security is non-negotiable. And it sent a message to future Congresses that touching Social Security comes with severe political costs. As the controversy goes on, we expect more details to emerge about what exactly Congress hoped to achieve. But what we do know is that retirees' response was timely. It prevented the normalization of benefit cuts. It put lawmakers on notice. And it created political space for alternative solutions. What happens next will depend on what Congress does in the next 6 months before the election. If they reverse or modify the March 2026 reductions, this moment will be remembered as a victory for grassroots advocacy. If they hold firm, affected retirees and their advocates have already shown they are prepared for a protracted fight. They have shown they are ready to respond. And tonight, for the first time in decades, Congress appears to be genuinely uncertain about whether they can cut Social Security without facing devastating political consequences. Capitol Hill is quiet, too quiet. And when lawmakers are quiet on entitlement reform, it means they are recalculating the political risks. It means they are choosing their next move carefully. Because tonight, Congress learned something they should have known all along. Retirees vote, retirees organize, and retirees remember. This story is far from over. But tonight, one thing is clear. March 2026 will bring smaller checks to millions of retirees. Those retirees are not accepting it quietly. And the political battle over Social Security's future has only just begun. And we will be here, watching every detail as the next phase unfolds.